Hi gang, thank you for coming out and watching. Fire away with any questions. I'm all ears and hopefully I can give you some answers. Any questions? Well, let me talk through then. I'll talk through what I was trying to get out of that session. So in true transparency of a coach, you plan for about 12 things and you get through 2. So for that session, that was probably my third bit of attacking work that I wanted to get through, and I had 3 other bits that I wanted to bring in to round off what I was trying to get out of that session, which was run, kick, catch, pass skills. So I got through the run and the pass and then put that into game context, but I wanted to bring in some kick technique, which would have been a micro type drill. I say drill, micro exercise to get them warmed up and give them some technical pointers on the kick, and then bring that into a mini competition where they're getting a bit of fun out of it, and then finish off with a game where run, kick, catch, pass, finding Bob, as that was the starting principle of the game, was able to be explored by the players. So finding Bob was run, kick, catch, pass. To me, is trying to exploit space to score tries, and that space that I've defined is between space, outside space, and behind space from an attack point of view. So I abbreviated that to that age group to find Bob. So whatever they do now, if someone shouts find Bob, they're going to be looking hopefully for between, outside, behind space to exploit in the moment. So good little cue and a good principle to keep reinforcing to the players. That was my session design. And again, the first 2 bits was around between and outside space, working on that. Second big block of that was putting it into game context. Didn't get to the 3rd and 4th block. Any questions? I adapted the length in which I was doing certain exercises because I felt they weren't getting the learning benefit out of it. So the micro stuff at the start, that is for me skill primer, which should be 3 or 4 minutes per exercise, just to then get them into a small-sided game. So the game that I stuck with for the majority of the session was actually supposed to be small-sided game, so a team of 2 and a team of 2, but because the numbers were smaller than expected, it just was 2 teams. And I adjusted the space to make it work so that they were able just to continue in that space and get some learning from it. So yes, in short, adapted quite heavily on the fly, but with a bit of rationale and having a bit of a pre-plan before that. Adaptation of a session is really important so yes, in short, yes, for that age group and getting the right learning and the right reps and the amount of time to explore that skill, I definitely adapted on the fly how much time I wanted to give to those exercises so they got something out of it and we weren't just ticking a box of my session plan, 100%. And in club, we definitely do that. If the girls are feeling shot because they've had a really tough game on the weekend, but we've got stuff that we need to get through for the next weekend to fix up, get through, get certain exposures, sometimes you're going to have to adapt and you're going to have to compromise certain things to make sure that the group feel ready but not knackered and not mentally drained. And that's what our little coach performance meetings before sessions and at the start of the week look to combat and look to pre-plan for. Okie dokie, let me get my session plan out just so that I don't miss. Okay, so the kicking bit was they're going to be in 2s. The kicking cue was going to be ball drop over kicking foot, so kicking ball placement over kicking foot, and nose over toes, jog through the kick. So making sure that they're not leaning back and putting a brake foot on, nose over toes, kick through and catch. And it was going to start shorter, get bigger, and then a ball each to add a pressure. So it's good to add a pressure of the skill. So get that technique going 5, 6, 7 minutes, however much you need for the group of players that you're working with. It might take 10 minutes to actually get some consistent strike. You've got to be adaptable to that time. And then to bring in a pressure, but also a bit of competition that keeps that fun element and that interest high. Per partner, they have a ball each. Kick simultaneously going through that same process, but the pressure is they've got to think about the next job, and that's to catch the ball. If they both catch the ball, that's a point to that team. You line them up, how many people caught the ball, you got a point. We're going to do this 5 times. Who comes away with the most amount of points? What partnership? So that brings it into a game, but it's still very skill based. So that was my initial skill part of the kick. Then we were going to go into a game where it was just team versus team. Kick passes, complete is a catch. You've got to complete 10 times. That team, that's their version of scoring a try. You turn it over and let the other team have possession. And then we were going to go into just a normal game of conditioned touch, where run, kick, catch, pass. You can mix it up how you want. The first 3 phases, can we score through the hands? 3 to 6 phases, where's that behind space? And that was the manipulation of the game to finish. For me, with an age group team and a team I don't know, it would just be about strike pattern and body weight through the ball in a just end over end punt. I wouldn't do anything else until I knew the group and I felt comfortable with where they were at as a group and their understanding of the variations of kicks, for sure. Yeah, try and vary the competition within it. You know, in that triangle drill, for example, you can have 3 clusters of those triangles working as a team, 3 or whatever, however you cluster them, and combinations. They've got to marry up all their well, they're still doing their exercise, but you've got to tally up. That group's got to tally up how many tries they get against that group. And you know, it changes up the stimulus. They've got an awareness of what those other teams are doing, tactical prowess changes, all of that stuff. Things like that, just mixing up the competition tends to get a stimulus. But if you're in an environment where you can bring in a little bit of a vibe because it's a skill primer, it's about energy, a bit of music, you having a bit of a laugh, making it not about a drill, making it about a skill and a competition, you can, well, for me, I do what I feel in the moment. Sometimes I bring in music to our technical stuff because you can see they're like, oh, and you put a bit of music, it changes the vibe. So whatever you're comfortable with as a practitioner, as a coach, like you do that, but just finding a different stimulus to create a bit of competition in a different way, or changing the mood of the setting can add easy wins in my experience. It's good. So anything I would change, to be honest, it's hard with one coach. So for me, I'd love someone else co-coaching and helping because it's really hard to give meaningful little pointers and re-energise, re-kicks of energy with the group. So not necessarily the drill per se, but having the facility or resource to be able to have a little bit more minutiae detail coming into those groups it would be of benefit, and that's what I ideally would like. How I would progress it on, definitely bringing in a kicking element. So I'd probably split that session in 2. So I've started with that session. Next session, recap what we did about finding Bob. Do the same skill primer because you know, repetition is mastery, in my opinion. So if you can get something they really like and that is fun, get them doing it all the time because they know it. It gets them into a space where they're switching on, and that's really important. And then going into that second part of the session that I designed, which was kick skill into a kick game, which is pretty much multi-directional kicking, which will be a different stimulus of game, which will give them a good kicking rep, but also a different enjoyment factor. Then bring it into a game where you're playing a manipulated touch game. So touch, run back to the line if you want them to get a bit of speed exposure, or touch sprawl because you want them to work on their speed to feet from getting back into the game, whatever that may be, and manipulate how you want them to get kicking into that game. So sometimes I allow one of their attackers to be offside, which creates a different defensive picture, and it gives the attack another stimulus to look behind. So there's lots of different things that you would do, and quite often I've got a bank of what I'd go to what I think would work best with that group, but that's probably what I would do next from that session. Sorry, I went on a bit there. I trust them to pick out. So I would want them to know the terminology that I had spoken about at the start of the session. So confidence to take players on, to get in between or outside, and looking for opportunities to score tries. So that terminology I'd want to reinforce by co-coaching little points. You know, don't hesitate, take them on, don't wait for the defence, that kind of stuff. So I'd want a quick 5-minute meeting prior to that session, just saying these are the key things. Anything you see that relates to that, get after it. And this is a challenge at Premiership level. You've got organised defences that get off the line, and you can't see obvious space outside. You perhaps can't see obvious space behind because they're organised, but what we can do is layer up and manipulate to find between space, exploit shoulders, slight disconnects in speed of alignment getting off the line, things like that. So from a Premiership point of view, I'm always looking at pictures of where I can find between space, because it's obvious when you see outside space and behind space, but it's that between space that you've really got to give the players confidence to get after, especially when it's not clear and obvious and you've got organised defensive sides. So if you can give players from a young age that terminology and that confidence to look for in between and not just overlaps, layering up, etc., it just takes that attack next level when they get into senior. So that layering up, knowing when to stay and keep width or get in behind and go, you know, forwards, not just being a carry-off 9, but being a run, distribute out the back to give a layered call to then play into the space out wide. It will evolve that type of attack to a better level, because at the moment I think defence is probably edging us and attack is probably a little bit behind. This is my opinion, it's not gospel, but I think attack is probably a little bit behind, and we need, in my opinion, the women's game needs emphasis on attack, layering up, and that between space for me is super duper important, coaching that. I think you can technically, I think it's good to get doses of technical confidence within micro competition. So it doesn't have to be the game is the greatest educator, just chuck them into a game, but they can't, you know, pass confidently or they can't run confidently. I think breaking down what you want them to do on a pitch with context is really, really key for real growth of skill development. And then having principles and making those principles simple and consistent, and designing games to get after those principles. So if you wanted just to focus on defence, getting up off the floor and getting off the line, making a game where that is the absolute outcome, and if you can do that consistently, you get points, whatever it may be. But I think you can make principles of the game model that you're trying to do very, very simple, and break it down into micro skills, then into a purposeful game. That's how I tend from low level to the top level. That's kind of my philosophy. I think it's players enjoy it, they're getting good development opportunities, and you're allowing them to explore through game context scenarios, A, that you want intentionally, or B, as a byproduct that you didn't realise that they got, which is a win-win. In my experience now, I retired as a 33-year-old and I would get so annoyed by not playing rugby. So if you don't put a game context into training at some point, no matter how detailed you need that skill development or that fix up or work through that you need to get to be ready for the weekend, I think you do lose a certain amount of engagement from the group if you can't give an element of competition gameplay, etc. And that might just be me. I know there's line-out noses out there that love 90 minutes of codes, colours, back, forward, speed, all that stuff, and I'm like, oh, yay. But for me, I'm very attacking lensed, and I think it's important, if you want to get the best out of the attack, to express themselves and feel confident in whatever scenario. You've got to give them exposures to chaos, unpredicted game context. Otherwise, how can they practice and make mistakes, look at it, learn, move on? So no, I love it. Well, it's been massive in terms of my learning, and I've enjoyed the challenge of learning about high performance setting versus development performance. I'm still evolving as a coach on how to learn about a group of players, implement attack in a way that is aligned with the group of players we've got. Is it entertaining to watch and it gives good outcome? And that is something at the moment I'm still going through a process, and it's definitely an unexpected level of learning that I'm getting. I think at under 20s, the explore and having frameworks, you know, having a cage and letting them fly within it, I think is how I would visually put my philosophy in under 20s. I set some really loose principles and I let them go within that, and whatever came out of it, we would take the learnings from it. For me, that's, you know, lovely. As you get up to more performance end, that obviously isn't the case. You've got to give enjoyment, you've got to give exploration, you've got to trust their decision-making capabilities as a group, but you also have to have a game model that you know is going to give you an outcome-driven result, whether that's a win or a performance or what we want to play like. That for me is still my learning, and I'm happy to sort of admit to that, like, unexpected level of learning for me, but an enjoyable one. And I'm enjoying my environment with Quins and the player group and all of that comes with it. You know, human beings are complex individuals, and you have to work with the highs and lows of all of that, and the evolution of the game. We've got professionals that are away now with Six Nations, and you've got, you know, little Lily who is working at Tesco's 3 times a week, busting her gut, but she still wants to try and get in and train as much as she can. And it's the diversity of the group that, again, is a really good challenge. The evolution of the game is unrecognisable. Like, the commitment of the players and the expectation of the players still at this time is going through a really tough time. Like, you've got players who are wanting to commit to be professional as they can be, but they've still got to pay bills because rugby isn't paying bills. So in that sense, I resonate a lot with the working class player, because that's how I was. I was a police officer 10 years, worked out shift patterns and how I was going to manage my year, week, month to make myself most available for rugby, because that was my first passion, and there's a lot of women still doing that now. So I have a lot of understanding, and I really resonate with that group, so I know that contextually really, really well. But there is a different part of the game where you've got professional players who have that time, want detail, want that next level to take the game to the next level, that for me is unrecognisable to what I experienced as a player. And luckily for me, I've had just about enough exposures as a coach to really tap into that group of players and help them. If I was newer into coaching than I am now, I think I would be behind the curve of what that player group needs. And it's a really high level detail, which, 3 years down the line, this game is going to be, the women's game is going to be unbelievable in terms of tech, tack, and actual skill execution, acquisition is going to be massive.
That's where we need to.
And that's where you guys as that pathway element are massive, because if you can have the ambition to want to learn the game as it is now and have the ambition to think where the game's going to be in the future and help get those players there, the world's our oyster. 2025 will be exciting, which is our home World Cup. So. Life changing. So for some of the players that your young team will know and love and want to idolise, if they didn't have a centralised contract, they wouldn't be seen, they wouldn't be accessible to all the players that you're working with to be role models. That's how important it is. It's not only about paying the bills, it's about creating accessibility to being visible. They can't be visible if they're stuck in an office or stuck in a response car or fighting fires or whatever it may be. They're visible and accessible because they've got the affordance to do that through their ability to be paid as a professional rugby player. So fundamental to the game growing, and it needs to get into the clubs. 5 years down the line, my ambition would want to see our entire squad professional and being able to live off the domestic game, so that we get a full professional setup. That's a big ambition, but that's what we're aiming for as a club. Stay curious, watch the game as it is now, be ambitious, try stuff. It doesn't matter if it fails, get on, move on, evolve, and just whatever you do, don't stress it to the point where it doesn't become fun for the group. If it's fun for you to coach, it's going to be fun for them to learn. So the ambition has to come from within, and the curiosity. Don't just sit on a bank of drills that you know you can deliver. Be curious, learn from it going well or not, because that will only help those players in the future. Thank you.